Onko nyt niinku enemmän kuin äsken? Joo, tää onkin mielenkiintoista. Meiltä puuttuu monitorointi. Good afternoon. I suppose we have non-Finnish speakers in the audience also now, so we'll try to conduct our thoughts to our mutual language, English. Welcome to the discussion panel of the research days. We are given the topic of arts and research yesterday and today. So for this reason, actually, it would be nice because actually we could be talking of anything between the earth and the sky, basically, arts and research. So first of all, I would like to, before I introduce our panelists, I would like to ask all of you to come a little closer. It's kind of, I mean, we are talking about communication, aren't we? Essentially. And communicating with people who have decided to step back and not take part is a little bit like communicating with a wall.
We're all trying to keep a distance from each other.
Oh yeah, well,
6 meters is
it's in Italy it's 1 meter, so it means in Finland approximately 3 meters. So that's much better. And we also have a microphone for you to this thing. How do you call that?
It's catch box.
The sneeze box is over there. Okay, sorry. I'm not going to tell bad jokes anymore. So, welcome to the discussion panel. My name is Ville Komppa. I'm working as a music theory lecturer here and humbly trying to be a dissertation student every now and then also. In the panel there's 3 colleagues and wonderful people. Assi Karttunen is artist and researcher on scholarship right now, I think, and you are also teaching at the Sibelius Academy. Then Cecilia Oinas is a lecturer of music theory, music researcher, postdoc researcher. Lauri Väkevä is a professor of music education and also the vice rector responsible for education, exactly. And our topic, arts and research, yesterday and today, however wide, we could actually start by narrowing it a little bit by talking about arts and the 2 things we have in arts and research that are actually not exactly the same, which means artistic research and research of arts. These 2 lines of research are quite different also historically, isn't it right? We have a long history of research in arts, and then we have a fairly short history of university artistic research, isn't it so? Who wants to catch this topic?
Me?
Well, you are the professor, so maybe it's your responsibility.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting because first time I got in contact with artistic research was when I arrived in Sibelius Academy from another university back in the day, like 13 years ago. And I've never counted myself as an artist nor artist researcher. My background is in researching of art in educational context. So in a way it was a really big turn of the head for me, like, oh, there's more going on in the art world research-wise than just what we do at the humanities. So it's been, for me, it's been like a really eye-opener, and I've also noticed, or I have been taught, and I recognize that there are different histories of artistic research, so we have 3 different traditions. So what our colleagues do in fine arts and partially also in performing arts has a bit different, they have a bit different forums for what musicians do in this business. And that's been one of the challenges, of course, in terms of coordinating artistic research in this university. I'm not working anymore as a vice rector of research, so I'm not talking here as a vice rector responsible of that, but I have my history in that as well. So that's been one of the key, I think, key strategic spearheads for the university level development, to kind of like tie those ribbons together. And of course it doesn't happen from top down, it must happen from bottom up, so it must be the scholars who are more and more joining together. But we do have an artistic research center at the university, which has people from music, from fine arts and from the performing arts, so we are on our way towards something more unified, perhaps concept of that. That's my comment.
We actually have 3 panelists who, Laura comes from the humanities, Cecilia comes originally from music theory research, which is kind of not artistic research, but actually also part of the humanities originally. And Assi, you are actually the artist here, in that sense, although especially Cecilia as an acting pianist and has done a lot of artistic research, especially now in her postdoc phase. But isn't it so that because you come from the ancient music side of things, that's actually, you could say that in old music, so to say, there's been a lot more going on in terms of research, really artists conducting research already back in the day.
Yes, that is indeed true that in the early music kind of field, it's not unusual that musicians actually conduct research. And not all of them call them artistic researchers. But there are several reasons why they maybe don't use that terminology or that term exactly. But they are actually doing research which is influenced by their practice, very much so. So everybody knows here Professor Lawrence Dreyfus, for instance, who is a very well-known and magnificent musician as a viola da gamba player, but he's also publishing books as a musicologist. And there are harpsichordist, organist John Butt, for example, and Elizabeth Le Guin, who is a cellist, baroque cellist. So I have grown into thinking that it's not, these fields of art are not contrary or opposites of each other. But of course, I also happen to think that musicology could be informed by the practice-based work we are doing. It's kind of a pity if we ignore all this knowledge we are actually gaining through our practices.
So could actually, Cecilia, could you elaborate on this, or what I'm actually thinking about is that is there really what is the difference between a kind of practice-based research or artistic doing research to be a better artist and then researching artistic research?
Well, I guess there are quite many ways how I start to unpack this theme. As for myself, because I'm kind of, as a researcher, I have been in between these two traditions, because originally, as you mentioned, I started as a music theory major, and back in the days when I was writing my master's thesis, the music theory literature is very often centered on musical works, and somehow the methodology is really about how the musical work works in itself, and the performance or the performer is really not so much in the center of attention. But I would also say that the artistic research, even though it's a very big umbrella term, it is also, at the moment, it is affecting also every kind of music research, not just the one that we label as artistic research. And I think the way how the performer's tacit knowledge is now valuated, that it is invaluable information, it also actually liberates in the more traditional music theory and music research to consider something that happens in behind. And so this is really it's a very, very, very difficult question. I would say also that in some way performance has been somehow present even before we had this term called artistic research. But so it's nothing new, but the way how it is now institutionalized, that is a new thing. And I think one of the most difficult tasks now is how to kind of, as an artist, how to find a methodology that somehow still is part of research and not just autoethnographic reflecting on your own practice.
Just add something from my own field or background. I think it's an educational context when you're teaching art. The difference is not always that relevant. And I know that some colleagues might disagree from music education, perhaps not. But it's an interesting discussion because at music education department, all our students do a scientific thesis. And it's fine because it comes from the teacher training background. It comes from that background. But there's also art education teaching that is more based on the artistic practice. So I think this is the one field where we can actually when we always don't have to make that hard distinction between the artistic and the scientific research, and it might also have relevance for the training programs as well.
Well, then this kind of raises a relatively, I don't know, somebody could say a stupid question. What do we need artistic research then for? If we have research and it has its own conventions, why artistic research? And how is it really different? I mean, what's the use? In Sibelius Academy is actually one of the first universities, arts universities, to install a program on artistic research already from early 90s, right? Or even, yeah, early 90s, I think. Who knows better?
You want me to throw you some facts, some interesting facts? Do you really want to know the facts, or are you not interested in the facts?
Facts are always interesting, aren't they?
The first PhD in composition in America was probably given in the 1930s. And the first, I'm quite sure that, for example, in the revivalist movement of reviving early music, then there was already work being done in the 1920s, without doubt, which is very important for forming the basis of future knowledge about the existence of repertoire and the existence of instruments and so on. In my own field of music technology, there's been artistic research going on since the late 1940s.
But
so, I mean, it depends on a lot of things. I mean, people are eager to stakehold the fact that they've been recently inventing artistic research. But in music, I think you'll find that the people who have been writing the corpus of music, people, for example, if you look at Milton Babbitt from the 60s or something, the kind of research he did into the theory of what he was doing as a composer is so incredibly deep and so far-reaching in all fields of mathematics and so on, but depends on how you define it. I mean,
this is exactly the question. How do you define artistic research? Because there's been research in arts always. Actually, arts is research quite often. Actually, most art making is somehow related to research always. So what is artistic research? How is it different from some other? I mean, you're not doing PhDs when you're doing artistic research, actually.
First of all, I would like to answer to this professor's very good point. I think Andrew, the point is that we are not maybe inventing artistic research in Finland, but we are maybe kind of participating in this long tradition. I agree with you that the tradition is much, much longer than we can imagine when we first think about these things. For instance, in my field of research, I could mention many musicians who did artistic research. To start with, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, for instance. He wrote a very important work which is still valid for keyboard players all over the world. So, and there are many others. And during my teaching week, I use most of those texts every day. So I really do feel that I'm mostly like participating in a tradition of valuing art-driven or practice-driven research rather than inventing anything. So I don't try to kind of tell that it is my invention somehow, but yes. But you asked about the definitions. That is, of course, a difficult question. I also think that that we should give artistic research a kind of liberty to. We have to define, of course, what it is about mostly, but we also need to give it a freedom to kind of develop and be adjustable in our terminology and our definitions, because we don't want to rule out things. We want to be inclusive and encouraging.
Well, maybe to continue your question that why do we need artistic research? So I was thinking this yesterday when we had some initial emailing about what would be the topics we could maybe discuss, and I think also maybe we could consider this that's something that is important in our society, that as an artist that we can maybe present what we are actually doing to a wider society. And now I think the time is really good because we have various modes of presentation because of the new technology. So I think one of the problems how to present artistic research in older times that you had always a paper, a book, or an article, and now when you can present your research in a video, and you can have online-based journals. So I think artistic researchers can really, who are also practicing musicians, they can really benefit from the possibilities that we have now, and also I think because music research we think it's a big thing, but it's not such a big thing. So the more we also kind of open up what is it that we as artists are actually doing to non-musicians, that's also maybe some kind of I'm trying to find the word, not available resource. Duty. At least that's what I think.
This is the questions that I was asked most frequently when I was my short stint as a research vice rector. All the funders asked that question: what is artistic? How would you define it? Yeah. I always tried to be very polite and say that it's flexible. It changes all the time. It doesn't really help with the funders at all. Actually, I ended up many times talking about the artist's role in the study process. So, of course, my question on top of that questions would be that, can you do artistic research without being an artist? I would say that no, you can't actually. You can be part of an artistic research project. But if I'm not a painter or a visual artist, I can't do artistic research in fine arts. But that's my definition, so it might, there might be other options. Please.
What about an architect or designer?
Architect or designer.
That's interesting. Yeah, definitely. The minute we start to talk about art in more extensive form than what we teach at this university, it might change it. Also, when we talk about digital arts or digital art world, we end up in confusion. So my answer is not the best possible in terms of the whole field. It might cover something that we do, actually. I'm not sure about that. But just throw it around and what do you think about it? Can you be an artistic researcher without being an artist?
And of course we still have the question a little bit open of research in arts and being an artistic research. Kind of the idea of doing in humanities, we've been doing research in arts for centuries, or actually thousands of years in a sense, because the roots go back to Greece and so on. Assi.
I think Lauri pointed out an important factor concerning artistic research. It's very much about agency, that artists can't be left out from the research, field of research. And there has to be music research which is actually including artists' research. And if there isn't funding, if there isn't infrastructure, if there isn't also positions for artists doing research on their own field, which is music, that is a big problem. And it's not democratic to say that this field should be left for people who are not musicians only. Of course, musicologists can do it like they always have done it, but I also feel that musicians should be able to do research on their own questions, research questions, which they find meaningful and important. So in a way, artistic research is also a music political thing. It's about democratizing the ways we are gaining knowledge about our own field.
So who take part?
And who take part? You know, probably this not about us, without us. That's always used when we talk about, for instance, minorities and their role in the research which is done about them. So they are not very keen on research which is about some kind of minority if they are not included. And this is also happening in the music business, that we want to be included in the research which is about our field.
Well, can we actually then move on to because I think this is a question we can't fully exhaust now, but can we move on to thinking what the role of artistic research and research in arts, if we want, is at the Sibelius Academy then? I mean, what's the role here, and what it should be? Do you have some sort of, well, first of all, what's the role of artistic research in Sibelius Academy in general? I mean, do we all know?
Maybe you can start.
Are we all very familiar with that? Well, then we can talk about...
Not working at Sibelius Academy at this moment. I can offer my answer as a bit outside, but been working here a long time. I would say that the role of the research in art universities in general is not very voluminous, but it's very important. So at some point we counted for the whole university that it was about 10% of the academic activities, which is not much in terms of university. Of course, the 10% counts a lot, and there's a strategy of expanding that, especially at the postdoc level, getting bigger projects that go across the disciplinary lines. That's the university strategy. But I would say that it's really important for being an art university, where we talk about Sibelius Academy or the whole university. It's really key issue that we have research, and actually the law obliges us to have teaching that's based on research. We can talk about if it has to be scientific or it has to be artistic or both, but that's the law. And on top of that, the law says that we need to give the highest education in the arts and science in the university. So that's very interesting. Of course, we can debate endlessly about whether the law should say that teaching should be based on art, but it doesn't actually say that in terms of universities. So that's our interpretation of that. So you could argue that research should be in a very central position in an art university, but you can also counter-argue and say that no, it's most important to educate artists and not mix it up with good research. So that's one point of perhaps a political point of the matter, but I'm very sure that it helps in long term in terms of external funding to have that strong research profile.
So how does it really intertwine with teaching, research?
Well, we hope that, of course, or I hope, we, who is we? I guess we all here hope that research has some relevance to the teaching. So not just teaching the researchers, but also whoever we teach in whatever program or outside the university who comes to study with us. At least I hope there's a strong research background in that, but it doesn't mean that we only have to employ scientists or people working in humanities. They are of course welcome, and we welcome all possibilities of doing interdisciplinary research. But I think artistic research really has a strong role in this. There's also an added question, what is research? So if you argue that all art, as you said, all art in a way is research, well, that's fine, but we need to somehow prove it.
Institutionalize it so
Yeah,
that we can.
we need to make it, put it
Yeah.
in the box, and that's kind of like not very liberatory.
So, do you have something you
Yeah,
want to say?
sure. I could maybe reflect from the standpoint that I quite recently, so 2 years ago, I finished my scientific doctorate, and I have been wondering that is Sibelius Academy supporting postdoc research for doctoral students who have graduated. So, for instance, with me, it happened that I got a postdoc post at the University of Music and Performing Arts Graz for 1 year, which was really awesome. But then when I came back and I started as a lecturer, and this is which I love teaching, but the fact is that in my work contract, the research is something about 10% of the entire post, and it's not really very much. So of course, as a researcher, and I did my postdoc, and I had a lot of ideas that I could develop during my postdoc year in Graz, and they all, of course, reflect in my teaching. But at the moment, I'm not so sure how more longer or more elaborate postdoctoral research is supported from at the Sibelius Academy, or is it something that we need to kind of find external funding and then perhaps make some kind of an agreement to maybe lessen our teaching? But I really don't know, so I'm also, if somebody knows something about this more than I at the moment, so I'd love to hear about it.
Well, at least I know about the music pedagogy and the university pedagogical education. At the moment, it's a kind of 3 years pedagogical entity of all sorts of art-driven methodology and discussions. And during those years, it has been very clear to me that, or become very clear to me that the teaching should be based on research. Absolutely so. If it's not based on research, then of course it has to be kind of clear that the research means also art projects, so the art is also included. So it's quite clear that this University of Arts pedagogical education is based on research, and they are pro artistic research. But I have to say that in the field of music, we don't have maybe enough funding or enough maybe institutionalized support for artistic research. And there are some historical maybe reasons for that. But I think we should just be courageous and take the responsibility in order to develop this area, because otherwise we are left behind. That's my opinion.
Could you elaborate on the different pros or cons that you get by that you could think of by Sibelius Academy and University of Arts Helsinki putting more emphasis on artistic research and the postdoc possibilities at the university? What are all the kind of the benefits we could get as a university? I mean,
what are the benefits? Well, I think it's just the main human right, really. We cannot teach at the university level without it being based on research. It's like, I feel it's completely unethical if our teaching is based on something we don't know what it is based on. And if it's not clear and kind of transparent, if we can't kind of explain or open up our methodologies and kind of make it transparent on which it is based on, then I think we are in trouble. So that's my point.
Absolutely, I totally agree. I think when you have finished your doctorate, and it takes something about between 4 to 8 to 10 years, but you kind of already get used to the idea that what you are doing it's already part of the research and the way how you are reflecting yourself and how you are reading and listening and kind of like really receiving what is happening in the artistic research world. So that would be very odd not to continue that as a teacher and to continuously develop the way how it affects your teaching. So absolutely, I think it's very, as a music university, it's our responsibility to support that.
Yeah, I try not to speak as an employer here, because I don't want to go into personal policies. That would be a long discussion. But I will say something about my own background. I've been a lecturer at Sibelius Academy and a professor. And in my previous university, I was an assistant and a senior assistant. So when I was a lecturer at music education, research was included in my yearly plan every year. And I had a lot of teaching hours, I can say that. But that was kind of like expected, and I expected it myself. So we even made plans with the bosses for every year to have certain amount of articles. Not always it happened, but quite frequently it happened. It helped to have that kind of support, even from bosses who were not researchers themselves. So I think that a lot can be achieved by developing careers within university, not always forcing people to the lecturer or professor box, because I think in both roles should teach and do research, and we should make it possible. And I think it's just like if you're at the university, whether you're an artist, artistic researcher or scientific researcher, that's something that you need to do. If not for anything else, you have to be aware what's going on in the academic world. And I think our faculty is very well aware of what goes on in the academic world. So I would say that we are, in a way, an ideal art university in that sense, that we have very highly trained faculty who are interested in also research perspectives.
But I also think it's really important that we don't isolate ourselves here and that we have contact and interaction between other universities and to have visiting researchers from other universities and to broaden the view at what is happening also in other countries than just in here.
And that's business as usual at universities. So we need to think as a university more, I would say that.
Also, if any of you want to ask a question or give some sort of insight to this discussion, just raise your hand. We'll throw the sneeze box at you. Niilo. Okay, catch box. Catch me if you can.
Thanks. I'm one of those, I suppose, quite many part-time teachers in this university who don't have a PhD and who are not even doing it yet. So I'm actually asking what could or should be the ways to help people in a position like me base their teaching more on the research than is happening now, because it's quite evident that at least in a short time future, not all of our teachers will be PhDs or doing postdoc research. So how to kind of share the knowledge acquired by the research done in our university and also acquired elsewhere to those who are teaching but are not researchers themselves in the full-fledged meaning.
Someone want to comment?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you. And I think one kind of possibility could be that the faculties would endorse the research that is done among their field of art. For instance, the leaders of faculties could very well just include into the faculty's kind of responsibilities that they could inform about the research which is done which kind of deals with the issues that are taught at that faculty. So I feel it's a big shame if people who are working in a certain kind of faculty don't know about the research, which is probably done by the colleague. So, but usually the teachers here are so very active and so interested, like passionate about knowing about also about the research. So people seem to be very active and kind of proactive even in this sense. But I think the heads of the faculties should be responsible and feel their responsibilities in that sense and help in that matter. I don't know, could that be an answer, at least partly?
We have some heads of faculties, or former heads of faculties present, so what do you think? Andrew also asked for the mic, so if we start with Andrew and then move back there.
Hello. Well, I have just two very quick suggestions to Niilo. Is that from a point of view of a teacher who's been working here for a long time, is that the two pieces of advice are: one, don't wait till you get a PhD to become interested in research. No.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
And the second, try and get your students to be interested in research at an earlier, as early a point as possible.
Very good.
Ooh. Back there, I don't know, Samuli, can you, your 3-point shot hasn't developed that far yet.
Good exercise.
Good exercise, yes.
Thanks. I'm Kristin. I'm professor of folk music. I think that was a very nice question from Niilo. Thank you. I feel that is actually the responsibility of a professor, because I call it meta-teaching, and this is not my term, but the term I have adopted from a colleague, Mika Elo. I feel the role of the professor should be meta-teacher of the whole community of a certain specialty area, which means that the professor should be on top of the field, on top of the research that is happening, on top of the current trends in performance, on every kind of activity, and spread it forward to not only to the students, but to the fellow colleagues, lecturers, teachers, and all interested people. So it's kind of a many-sided role which has a lot of responsibility, but there has to be sharing of these issues. And while Asti was talking about the university pedagogics, I think that's definitely one path that we should, as an institution, much more offer to our teachers. I feel we might have a bit of a problem in sense that we have a restricted capacity of offering doctoral education to our own teachers, and this has been discussed actually in many occasions, that we offer doctoral education, but the numbers are very limited who can get in. And what happens if we restrict that year after year? Can our own teachers ever move on in their research paths and acquire more expertise? I'm a little bit worried on this, so this might be a bigger question. How can we facilitate the gaining of research skills in our faculty members, in our teachers, if we can't allow them more doctoral education? But certainly now it's working much better already, this university pedagogics. We can offer that. And I have been there myself for some time, and I feel it's a very great path towards more understanding of not only educational research, but gaining a bigger understanding of all the field. And you can kind of adapt that kind of knowledge to your own field then when you acquire tools, how to think about new information and so on, how to deal with new information.
I feel we are talking actually about the research community. Do we have, for example, in music education, there are clear. It's clear that there are research communities that's behind Arts Equal and all these really big, nationally big programs, actually internationally big programs nowadays. Do we have these sorts of research communities? Because actually artistic research and also the PhD research we've done at the Department of Music Theory and Composition have mostly been about one single person doing his or her own work and not paying much attention to the community. So should we have stronger communities?
Yes.
I don't think.
So how could we have stronger communities? That's a better question, I think.
That's a difficult question. I think, especially after my graduation, I have been kind of craving to have a community with whom I could share the ideas, and maybe that's one of the reasons why my own solution has been to travel quite a lot. So the various conferences and seminars and workshops that is happening throughout Europe and US are, for me at the moment, a kind of an answer to my needs. But I would really hope that, for instance, in the composition and music theory department, it doesn't really matter which department, but same-minded people, and some can do artistic research or more practice-based, other more generally like music theory, music analysis research. But I do, this is a bit of the same that I already talked about before, that especially in what happens after the doctorate, if you are doing the doctorate. So do we have places where people can form a community? I'm not really sure about
Just
it.
a quick comment. We do have free research centers. Some of the directors are here actually.
Yeah.
So if that's one way to kind of like channel that energy and interest as a postdoc, I think that's one reason that the centers were established. Not the only reason, of course. We want to establish strong profile and etc. But that is one that we didn't have this structure before. I know we don't have premises for the centers. That's one problem that we need to solve quite fast, but we do have them as an operative organizational constructs.
And we do have SibA research days also.
Can I add one point? I think
Yes.
In the research field it would be very beneficial if we could form kind of larger at least research groups. And these research groups would be healthy in a sense that they could include also people who want to do more the practical art work, and they are not interested in publishing articles, because I'm kind of worried that if we start to think that only the University of the Arts would be the center of the artistic research, because probably it's done everywhere in Finland. Like Andrew said, that it's not always academic, or officially academic. But for instance, many composers feel that they are actually doing artistic research, but they are just not doing it in any academy because they don't have time. They do their job as composers. But I think research groups could be one answer to that.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Anne Coppola. I'm leader of the UniArts History Forum, and I'd like to comment a little bit now what's been said. First of all, I think IRCAM is one of the places where research and artistic work has been done for decades. I remember I was participating a long time ago in a discussion somewhere, not in Finland, and the leader of the IRCAM those days claimed that they want to have the first sort of status of that it was advanced there. And I don't think that people in that room actually had thought about it. Well, being an opera scholar, I must say Richard Wagner wrote already a long time ago about practice, how to perform the operas, not only his operas, also them, and how he composed. But I like to comment on the organizing of research. There are three centers. The one I lead the Uni Arts History Forum. My colleague here, Mieko Kanno, leads the Center for Artistic Research. And then we have Serada. And we have small resources, not very big ones, but anyway, we have resources, economical resources for organizing things, events, and also some money to hire researchers. Not many, but a few. And I think in the future, the crucial question will be how the research is organized in a beneficial way in Uni Arts, whether it's in the academies or whether it's in the Uni Arts level, and even if both, then how we can make sure that the dialogue exists. Now it doesn't, unfortunately. And I find in my work that very difficult, because the contacts to Sibelius Academy, even though I work there, are not very good in this matter. But I hope in the future we'll have better possibilities for dialogue. But I want to say to Cecilia that there is actually this Center for Artistic Research, and maybe you could find some help for your questions there.
Yes, I'm aware of. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I was left with two questions or two concerns. Please devote as much or as little time as you feel that it demands. So one was the question that artistic research can only be done by artists. And it seems wise, it seems natural. Of course, artistic research can only be done by artists. So then I immediately started to think, what's an artist, right? So I think it's more or less consensual that an artist is a practitioner of an art form. So I was concerned that since architecture is one of the primordial arts of humankind, let's just think about the Parthenon in ancient Greece, I was concerned that there was some some doubt if you could do artistic research in architecture. And even if that, with this sense that if an artist is a practitioner of an art form, being that architecture is an art form, consensually, then an architect is an artist. So that was my first, I was left with that concern, but that's not really important. The other question, more direct, that I have is this dichotomy between science, and I'm not speaking about hard sciences, I'm speaking about the world of science and the world of art. So there appears to be this dichotomy between arts and science. So I could phrase my question the following manner. Do you believe that artistic research is a scientific endeavor?
Endeavor.
Oh, whoop.
Just
Okay.
a quick comment for the first one. I, of course, deliberately said it as a question, but I started with saying I'm not an artist. Actually, I'm an art educator, so in technical sense, I'm an artist, but I'm not a professional artist who makes a living through art, at least when I'm in this admin job. So it's if we kind of like expand the exactly, if we expand the artist's role to whatever is creative in the arts fields, then we get a really different kind of but you might also perhaps reframe it as a question of artistic process / practice. Should artistic process be at the center of the study? But that would be a bit problematic, because I can be a natural scientist and study artistic process and not knowing anything about phenomenologically how it feels to be an artist. So I've said that there's some about the second question, perhaps somebody else can answer.
Yes, thank you for a very, very good question. In my opinion, you asked that whether artistic research is a scientific I think it absolutely is, but the mode of presentation, it's just different. So I think there will always be the problem how to verbalize those things in, let's say, in music that is basically non-verbal, and I think, but it doesn't make it less scientific in my view. So I would say that we have enough space in our scientific umbrella to include artistic research into scientific endeavor. That's my opinion. Yes.
Yeah,
Do you want to?
Assi.
Well, I agree with the previous talkers, and I would like to add a point, so that there is maybe a certain thing which is in art which is not as such scientific, and I think art has a lot to do with irrational things also. Kind of there is this art is usually used when human beings try to understand also irrational world. So, but the ways artistic research is done is usually, or they are usually done in ways which are kind of dealing with this question in a way which is not irrational. So you can deal with this question in a rational way, even though the theme or the subject matter of your research is actually about something you can't describe as scientific or like just rational or about. Do you understand the kind of, yeah? So yeah, so maybe a good example is that, for instance, there was surrealist movement, everybody knows, and there we had a surrealist poetry, for instance, and it deals with a kind of a lot of it deals with irrationalities and kind of things that we can't maybe explain easily, but still they used many kinds of experiments. Part of them are not at all scientific. They could be even described now as dangerous or unhealthy and maybe forbidden nowadays. But when we research now surrealist movement, we can do it. We can conduct the research in a more or less rational way. So, well, but I don't want to claim that everything is so clear and easy. So it's a kind of matter of balance, and we have to be kind of. It's a kind of matter of negotiating every and single case, I think.
Yes, let's see. And if anyone else, just raise your hand. Yeah, Johanna. Composer's question, or what? Maybe you can do the follow-up. I mean, let's see. You know, I mean, it's fine.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to jump to a little bit different topic for a while, if that's okay. I just recently read this comment from Jari Perkiömäki, the principal of the Art University, and he was talking about the role of artistic thinking in society. So if we go to a little bit bigger picture, but my question is still like about the artistic research in Sibelius Academy, but whether it has a goal to, you know, connect to some larger themes in society, and how that could come about. And he was also talking in the same comment about a strategy which has been developing. I don't really know the details about it, but which would include maybe more projects that involve different sectors of society. So I was just interested to know whether these themes connect to the artistic research, or what is perceived as kind of, you know, goals of artistic research. Yeah, thank you.
It's nice always to comment on your boss, which I'm doing here, but Jari is my boss. But yeah, we do have a new strategy, and it's actually out in the open in Artsy already, and soon it's going to be published like in a proper manner through the world. So if you're interested, or of course many of you have been part of the process, but if you're interested to read it beforehand, because it's going to be operative the next year. So we're actually going towards it already. So all the kind of like big scale planning that we start to do in developing education towards curriculum processes, and that have to do with the strategy, but also research. So there are actually quite many points there. I think it's a very different strategy than our previous one, which was for me it seemed very flexible and very kind of like perhaps higher level in that sense that it didn't really guide very thoroughly what we do academically. But the new strategy has pointed, for instance, which is not surprising, ecological responsibility is one of the big themes there. Also social responsibility and cultural responsibility. So this is, in a way, it's not a new theme, of course, for the academies, but it's something that's first time kind of like articulated at the strategy level. About artistic research, of course, you probably, a lot of you know about the discussion about art research. What should we call it? Should we call this whole scope of different research approaches that our university includes, should we have a name for that or not? It's an ongoing discussion. But what is said in the strategy is that we do both in that sense, that we don't restrict ourselves of doing scientific art research and we don't restrict ourselves for doing artistic research. We do both and hopefully in tandem so they overlap and support each other. I think that's in the strategy as well. So Jari was, about what you said in Jari's comment about the artistic thinking, that's also articulated in the strategy. And that's something we really need to think about if we want to endorse artistic thinking throughout the society. It's a very new position for us as a university and the academies as well. I guess that's really one of the biggest concerns or goals that the new strategy has. What is the role of artistic thinking in society in general and arts also? So the new strategy has a very strong inside-out movement that we are going to do something constructive in society. And also it's done for 10 years. Well, it's done for 24, but it's the strategy season is for 2030. So when the strategy becomes operative and new students are starting with the new curricula, they are going to graduate in 2030. So we are looking at the future now, which we don't know anything about actually. So even the future scientists, futurologists say that we don't really know what's going on after 10 years with all these changes happening. So it's very interesting times we are living.
We have one question there. Another Johanna.
Hey, something came up in my life like 2 weeks ago. I was really happy to take part of this seminar, and I was performing there, and other people were in the fields of business and CEOs and like in a different field than arts. And it turned out so that this group of people, really successful people around from the world, they were really interested in my work and my way of thinking. And that totally blew my mind. Like, we arranged a situation in this during the seminar. Like, they really wanted me and my colleague who we were playing with to open the process, the artistic process, in front of them. And they actually asked me those questions that I ask myself as an artist in the core of the artistic work. So you said about the artistic thinking, and I saw this overlapping, really turning point, because these people are solving really big problems in UN and in business world and in environmental issues and all the things that we are coming up soon, the huge changes. And now they are really interested in this artistic thinking, how they come up with idea of something really irrational that you said, like how to find well, no words, but you maybe got the point. That this is really, I was really surprised, and that was my dream as an artist, to kind of collaborate with people who are really solving things, and they said that thank you for opening the door, actually. So
I'm just here, before before you continue, thank you for your wonderful experience, because there are actually two examples that I would just like to that are from recent articles or from recent news. One is that, of course, there was this idea of bringing to schools this new subject, like how to behave as a human being, or so, something like that, for ethics for preschoolers or something like that. And then somebody just wrote in the yleisöosasto, what's that reader's word? Mikä on yleisöosasto? In Helsingin Sanomat. Letters column in Helsingin Sanomat, that we have this thing already. It's called arts. You've been cutting out arts from school. Just bring that back, and then you have that subject there already. So that's one example. And another example is that we are all that our business life is bringing people like something like sports coaches, like the basketball coach of the Finnish national team, Henrik Detman, is always asked to go to business meetings and so on, and to talk about how to make teamwork and stuff like that. So I mean, these are examples that people who are not in our field might actually just not realize what arts is used for and useful for. And that's one thing that as researchers we could actually have a much greater impact in the society if we found those people and those places where we could communicate these things.
There's also the field of participatory research, which is basically the idea of enabling ordinary people to do their own research, base their own.
Yes, and there's a long history of work done in developing countries, for example, that it should be based on participation and not like von oben.
Just a quick comment what you said about this renewed interest in the arts and perhaps more general in the cultural and creative sector. The people who are planning the big EU programs, they share that interest. And that's something new, because we were in Brussels, the rectorate, and we were kind of like lobbying, but we didn't have to lob at all, because they were like, oh, you are doing a wonderful job, we love that, and do you have projects that you could send your people to? And this, like, I was there 4 years ago, and it was like nobody understood anything about the meaning of art. So something has happened in the big scale, and EU has the world has so big problems that I think they are trying to mobilize every possible ways of overcoming those problems, and art and cultural sectors are seen as very in demand field for that, and I love it. This is just exceptional times, like everybody's interested in this. So something has changed, hopefully it will stay.
But it needs a lot of dialogue too.
And it needs lobbying still.
Yes.
So that's what I guess the leaders and admin people try to do outside the university. Yeah. And of course the artists and the academics should do that. So we need to be out there, we need to do things.
Yes. Good. Do you want to?
I may.
Yes.
Johanna raised an interesting point when she mentioned problem solving
yes.
and arts. And I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about that, which has to do with the artistic design thinking, design process. So that's one thing, and then it comes into what you were saying about bringing arts into school, and it has to do with the purpose of art. My follow-up question was regarding this idea that sometimes we have about science, and sometimes we mistake science by the scientific method. And I was not speaking about methods or the scientific method in hard sciences. I see science as the pursuit of knowledge, and to build or to give back to the academia or to the community, to layer upon the existing knowledge with more knowledge. Or saying it in a little bit more poetic form, science is the pursuit of truth. So what I was wondering, how does artistic research come about? And if it is still research, if it does not produce knowledge. So in a sense, the difference between artistic practice, which doesn't have the burden of producing knowledge. If it doesn't, it's okay. It's still art. But we are speaking about artistic research.
So what is the knowledge in artistic research?
Well, it kind of, it was brought back by this idea
Yes.
of people outside arts are really interested in what we are doing. Why?
Asi has something.
I would like to continue
else.
a little bit to Johanna's question, and then, but I like your question as well. I would just would like to kind of emphasize the fact that even though it might sound a little bit utopistic that art is going to save the world, it's not naive to say that among fields of art there are certain practices and certain kind of maybe ways of approaching things which include more imagination and kind of different kind of problem solving, and that can be really like a high currency for these fields which have not practiced or not kind of cultivated these kind of skills. I met this as an example. I want to bring forth a question of, for instance, touching in the field of medical and healthcare, which touching in healthcare has been a kind of a problem in Finland. And now there are several professors who are actually interested in researching this matter. And actually it has already now changed the infrastructure of our healthcare systems. And so it doesn't have to be so strange. It doesn't have to be like, oh, now harpsichordists are like changing our kind of paper industry or something. No, it's not that. So let's not. Probably they do, but still, I think there are kind of quite natural ways of cultivating these interests that are close to our heart in the field, in society. But it doesn't have to mean that all the art genres should be about kind of not valuable as such. So I don't see it that way. But do we continue to this direction, or
We are slowly running out of time, so we have to try to be clever with this.
I think he asked about methodologies.
Yeah.
Did I understand
Yeah.
right? Or
That's also, and the role of artists.
okay. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, one thing that, knowledge, exactly.
And knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing I suggested back in the day in some of our Sibelius Academy councils was that why do we need to use the word research? Well, I was answered that because the funders use it. But actually it would be, if there would be another word like inquiry, what people used 100 years ago, to kind of like cover more ground than just the scientific research, because that would raise the kind of like interesting issue of what kind of knowledge is produced in inquiry. It doesn't have to be always conceptual or theoretical, of course. It can be very like grounded, which we of course know from qualitative research and case study research and all that tradition, but I think the word research is sometimes a bit problematic because it's interpreted as having to do something with the science universities. So there might be
and
also
natural sciences,
but
especially.
the real sciences.
Yeah.
And it's not just us, it's our colleagues at humanities. They are suffering with that also at the EU level because they have their own lobbying organization for that, for the humanities. People don't even understand humanities often among the funders. So I don't know if the words are sometimes confusing here. Perhaps we should just talk about knowledge and problem solving and processes that are useful for some ends.
And human communication, because that's
Exactly,
what
yeah.
art is, actually.
Understanding, perhaps.
Yes.
About the human communication, I think I really don't know which of the topics this will relate, but there is, I think, an interesting dichotomy about the fact that performing artists are actually often quite introverted people. So even then we do very much of our work, we are doing it alone, whether we are practicing musicians or researchers. And then again, we of course also, we perform maybe to a very wide public, and I think that will remain a kind of a challenge, that in which way then we are able to communicate what we are actually doing also in other ways than just performing. And I think what you mentioned about the fact that you were kind of surprised how much something that has been very internal for you, your ideas and your creative ways of thinking, how they still interested actually people from very many fields. So I actually agree that there is something happening, and so I think this is a very positive times to be an artistic researcher.
Yes, I think if those were the best closing words we could have ever imagined for this discussion. I'm very pleased to have been part of this discussion. Thank you. Sorry, I'm always in the first name basis, but Assi, Cecilia, and Lauri, and thanks for your question. Now, just a friendly reminder that we have then the next session, lecture recitals coming in Organo Hall, which is just next door. There's going to be a couple of recitals, and then of course the social event in Agora 6:15, which of course is a brilliant place to continue this discussion. Thank you, everyone.